Well, dearly beloved, we're gathered here today to have a great day. But before we start, I've been asked to play Chief Airline Stewardess and point out to you the exits, which are there, and there. In the event of a fire or an alarm, find the nearest exit, and the assembly area for calling the roll is in the car park over there. As you walk through that door, you will have no idea where I've just pointed, but if you just follow the council members who will be leading in their panic to escape from the conflagration. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a genuine, and I mean genuine, delight to see you here today. COVID affected what we do. It affected what everybody did. And we did have a convention last year. But the convention last year was in the shadow of COVID. And I don't think we quite got the impetus back into our day-to-day business. Now, I'm just going to give you an overview before we go into what I believe is a very entertaining and very comprehensive series of presentations. There are a number of themes that you need to take away. 2025. 2025 is a key year in our future. And before COVID, we had a very carefully planned route to 2025, in which a significant number of key projects would be evenly paced and delivered financially in a sustainable way. But COVID drove a coach and horses through that ambition. But 2025 has not gone away. And as a result, much of what we do is now compressed into an artificially short period of time. More anon. Now, I'm sure that you'd like to be reminded who are some of the key people who run this organisation. My Politburo, as I like to call it, has sat behind me here on the proverbial roof of the mausoleum of Lenin. We are your council, and the governance of the organisation is fundamentally a council, which is the trustees, and the trustees are those who, via the Charity Commission, have personal responsibility for delivering this. But no man is an island, to coin a phrase, and there is a much broader base of people who support what we do. And when that group of advisors come together with the council, we form the board. So when you hear about the council and the board, that is the distinction. Now, in terms of personalities, myself, you're aware, Steve Davis, chairman of the A1 Steam Locomotive Trust, former Army officer and former director of the National Railway Museum. I have to say that I'm on record as saying that I'm attracted to highly professional and prestigious organisations, and that's why being invited to be your chairman was an absolute huge tick in the box for me. In no particular order, I'll just ask them to show their faces. We've got Gary Hughes. Gary? Gary's there. Gary is the council's business coordinator. In Army parlance, he's the adjutant who pulls all the agendas together and keeps us on the straight and narrow. Graham Bunker-James. Graham is our commercial director and well known to you all. Richard Courtney-Harris. Richard is overseeing at council level the P2 and has been central to the implementation, or certainly the development of the reorganisation of the way we do business. We've got Paul Bruce. Paul is focused heavily on the operation of Darlington Locomotive Works, but is pretty central to our move to Darlington Locomotive Works 2, a particularly uninspiring name for our future home. We haven't got a proper name yet, but we'll find something in due course. And you'll hear more about that later. And in fact, you will see our new home when you get down to the works today. We've got Graham Langer. Graham drives the communication cord and also some key elements of our social media update. And Graham is a long-standing member of council. Ben MacDonald. Ben has got the best job in the world. Every time we try and find him, he's trying to roll defenders in Spain. He's an engineer testing the capabilities of the new Defender. Is that roughly it? Yeah. But Ben is our group chief engineer, so oversees all engineering and brings fusion to the coordination of effort across both Tornado and the P2. We've got Chris Walker. Chris is our I nearly said long-serving, but also long-suffering finance director, and is pretty central to everything that we're doing at the moment. Chris, we're looking forward to giving you a quieter time. And then I think I've got the whole team. I've got Hugh Parker here, who is focused on operations of our locomotives on the main line. Have I missed anybody out here? No. But we've been served brilliantly by a fantastic head office team, led ably by Dawn Phillips, Janet Precious, and Lorraine Heathwaite. Go on, ladies. Now, there's some key people in the audience on what I call the board side, without whom we can't operate. In no particular order, of course, we've got David Burgess, who is our president, and David, if you like, is the organisation's godfather. Say again. David Champion, I beg your pardon, talking crap here, sorry. And over to my right is, where's David Burgess? Sorry. David, I owe you a beer now. Shows how much I know my team. Rob Morland. Rob, did I get your surname right? Thank you. Rob is the electrical wizardry man who is absolutely central to what we do. You might think it's counterintuitive, there's lots of electronics on a steam locomotive, but there is. Liz Gibson, who is here. Liz is looking after the way in which we communicate our offer at shows and the like. Terry Graham, who is project manager on both the P2 and increasingly at the moment focusing on the A1. And I'd also like to welcome the two men in uniform here who are our guests from HMS Prince of Wales. Now, before moving on, these things don't just happen overnight and with no effort. A significant amount of work has gone into pulling today off, in particular from the headquarters team at DLW. Now, it is a team effort, but I want to single out Dawn, please, for special praise. And Dawn, show our appreciation. We'd just like to come forward, please. So, I've alluded to the compression of a significant amount of work. As I go through this list quite briefly, bear one key element in mind. When we talk about volunteers, we're not talking just about those who do the essential work of operating the trains and cleaning and attending to our locomotives. This lot are volunteers, and they frequently subordinate their domestic priorities in the interest of what we do. And when you look at the scale of what we do, it is virtually, for many of us, a full-time job. And I think that a round of appreciation led by me for what these people do, I think would be entirely appropriate. I'm not going to steal too much thunder because we've got a lot to get through, but there is a shopping list and a half of activity which is going on, and the key challenge here is the simultaneous nature of it. We can't deliver anything sequentially. It's all coming at once because of that backstop of 2025. We've undergone a major overhaul of our governance and introduced a new IT system. Tornado is coming towards the back end of an exceptionally comprehensive, unexpectedly so, overhaul. And our fundamental priority as an organisation at the moment, at the expense of everything else, because something has to be the priority, is getting Tornado back on the main line and earning money. That is key, because while it's sat there being repaired, it isn't earning a dime. We have a new operating partnership in the offing with DB Cargo. We're fitting European train control system to Tornado, the first steam locomotive to get it. The P2 is advancing nicely, but not at the pace that I would like. It's a money issue, but it's also a personnel issue as well, because so much of our human resource is diverted to getting Tornado back on track. But this afternoon, we're going to wow you with some amazing progress as we unveil a pretty key component. The move to Darlington Locomotive Works 2 is ongoing and is happening while all this is happening. We have no choice about the pace because we have to evacuate our current building so that the council can get in and renovate it in time for 2025. We've launched a new commercial approach to our train offer called 21st Century Steam, with all of the rebranding involved in that. You're going to hear about the V4, and as a result of that, the financial situation for us, the elastic band is tightly stretched, and we're looking for imaginative ways of enhancing the rate of income. As Boris Johnson would say, and I hate to quote Boris Johnson, everything we've got is oven ready. The team here is champing a bit to deliver the lot, but it's all limited by the pace at which the cash comes in. Please get into my mind on this subject, what I'm trying to say to you. Now, I'm going to move on and allow the team to go through this wonderful presentation, but I just want to do a little bit of a sales pitch before I do so. Under here, we have two original sets of drawings for the P2, okay? One is of the streamlined version of the P2, and the other one is of the second P2, which had Walschaerts valve gear, and these are original LNER drawings. I was going to auction them tonight, but not everyone's going to be there tonight. So if you're keen to put in an offer for either or both of these, come and have a look at them. Give Dawn your name and a price, and then towards the end of the day, we'll look who the winning price was. If you're interested in going back to find out what the current front runner is and want to better it, feel free to do so, because it's not an auction, okay? You can gazump your fellow bidders. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's my introduction. It's a really important time. We're packing along. We are, and this is not an arrogant thing to say, I think we are absolutely at the top of our game within mainline railway heritage. We have a high-quality board, myself accepted from that, of course. I've got a high-quality board which is running like a sewing machine. We brief, we discuss, and we think through the challenges, and we take risks from time to time, because without risks you'll get nothing done. On the other hand, we don't take reckless risks. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Once again, let's have an enjoyable day. Let's enjoy and bask in the camaraderie of each other's company. And I look forward to talking to you later in the day. Thank you.
Many of you will notice that we're not blessed today with David Elliott's presence, who's been such a key part of this organisation, continues to be so. However, he has recorded a message for us, which we'll play now.
Those of you who are regular attendees at our conventions will notice that this time that I am conspicuous by my absence. Back in early 2020, I was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer, which in effect is incurable. The medical profession so far have done a very good job in keeping me going with several types of hormone therapy. Unfortunately, the treatment has now reached the point where I need to go on to chemotherapy, which I started 3 weeks ago. One of the downsides of chemotherapy is that it damages your immune system. So I have been advised very strongly to shield by my consultant. This doesn't mean that I'm not going anywhere. For example, I'm now stood in the workshop at DLW, but when I'm in here, I am observing social distancing and using a mask where necessary. However, I have been advised not to go to large gatherings of people, so this time I'm unable to attend the convention. The Trust has been well aware of my issue here ever since I was first advised of it myself, and are currently going through a process to ultimately replace me, as whilst I've probably got a good time to live, we can't predict this accurately. And they have started this process by looking for somebody to replace some of the activities that I do, plus making use of our existing resource, such as Alan Parkin on the design side, to take over that activity from me eventually. In order to not lose my knowledge of this activity, over the next few weeks and months, we will be conducting some internal seminars with our senior engineering staff, at which point I will be carrying out brain dumps on specific areas of my activity, such as tornado design, P2 design, various specialised areas such as brakes and modifications to take Rockmorland's electrical system. So that hopefully by the time when I'm no longer able to do this, we will have people in place who will maintain the continuity. Fortunately, as far as the P2 is concerned, the stuff which I call the blue skies thinking, which is like the redesign of the cylinder block and the cam boxes and the work that's being done on the pony truck and the crank axle, has now all been done in terms of design, and most of it has been manufactured. So what is left to do is a more conventional manufacturing activity. So it should not ultimately hold up the completion of the locomotive. In the meantime, I would like to thank you all for all the wonderful support you've shown over the years, and I hope very much that at the very least I'll be able to appear electronically at the next convention this time next year. Thank you.
Clearly this will be a significant shock to you all, as it was to myself and my fellow trustees and the remaining members of the board when David told us this dreadful news in 2020. As you can see, David is approaching this in a typically David, very matter-of-fact manner with great stoicism. And I know that you will join us in wanting to send David our very best wishes for the next stages of his treatment, and know that he's very well thought of and very much in our thoughts today and moving forward. Difficult to follow that, but I'm going to now try and pick up the mood and move forward into what Steve has described to you as what we will hope will be a really great day, and we've got some super things to share with you. I'm going to start, if a picture tells 1,000 words, then I've got about 90,000 words to get in the next 15 minutes. I thought I'd start with a reminder of where we were at the end of last year. The Cheshireman was the last rail tour that we operated on the main line with Tornado. It was a train that ran from Bristol to Chester after a move down from York to Bristol. And the whole period at the time was very difficult weather conditions, poor railhead conditions, and we ended up with several incidents on both the light engine move to Bristol and during the rail tour, which sadly left us with some significant wheel flats on both the tender wheels and the driving wheels, which meant that we were forced to take the locomotive off of the main line very much earlier than we had hoped at the end of last year. After just 2 weeks, or just 2 weeks after that rail tour at the beginning of November, a group of us moved the locomotive from St Philip's Marsh in Temple Meads. Here's the loco being loaded up onto the low loader one evening, and the locomotive coach, support coach and the tender ready to leave Bristol and head to Loughborough. After travelling overnight, the three vehicles arrived at the Great Central Railway, where they were offloaded And by close of play, or the end of the day on the 24th of November, Tornado was tucked up safely in the running shed at Loughborough. We spent, over the Christmas period, there was some other work that needed to be done to the locomotive, and straight after the new year, we ran a series of human factor trials with some of our drivers who operate us on the main line from the various train operators that we use. And we were specifically looking at how ETCS would fit in the cab, and in particular, the sighting and location of the driver's interface, which under ETCS will give the driver all of the information he needs. And Rob will follow my presentation with more information about ETCS and the work that has been going on to fit this system. After we'd had a day looking at that and driving Tornado in different conditions using the driver's interface, we then ran a weekend of service trains for our friends at the Great Central, and 2 days of operating or running trains on the railway in exchange for free board and lodging and a significant amount of support from them whilst we were lodging at Loughborough. And 3 lovely photographs from that weekend taken by Jack Boskett, who we will be hearing from later this evening. So by the end of January, we were ready to move Tornado from the Great Central Railway to Locomotive Maintenance Services in Loughborough to begin the heavy overhaul. And this was the time period that we had originally planned to be moving the locomotive into the works and starting the overhaul. So at the reverse of the end of the move from Bristol to the Great Central, the tender was moved into David Wright's workshops, followed by the locomotive, and then safely stabled inside the workshops, ready for work to commence. And we didn't hang around. The very next day, the team started dismantling the tender to make space, ultimately to make space elsewhere in the workshop so we could get on with other parts of the overhaul. And in just 1 week, we had stripped the tender completely, the wheel sets were out, the tender tank was off, and we had started removing key components, pipework, brake gear, etc. from the tender frames. This allowed us to send the frames away to be completely shot blasted and primed, and the work of beginning the preparation and the paintwork on the tender frames particularly began. All of the wheel sets from the locomotive, including those from the tender, have gone to South Devon Railway Engineering workshops at Buckfastleigh. And here you can see the tender wheel sets having had the tyres removed, with Ben, myself and David Wright discussing with South Devon the programme events which would lead to those wheel sets being retired and turned and returned to us. So once they'd done the tender wheels, obviously the driving wheel sets, the bogie wheels and the car taxi wheel set followed. But it wasn't long before the tender wheel sets were back in the workshops at Loughborough, which allowed us to re-wheel the tender and completely paint to quite a high standard those frames ready to receive the tender tank. More on that towards the end. As part of the work that we're doing at Loughborough, we've bought in 2 containers and a shelter which goes over the top, affectionately known as Crystal Palace, mainly because of the construction effort that went into building the thing. But the 2 containers either side provide great tool store, workshop or small workshop and storage facility for components as they come back from overhaul. And the sheltered accommodation, which is well lit undercover, provides other storage for the wheel sets as they came off the locomotive and other large components awaiting their turn for restoration. As you can imagine, in an overhaul of this size, a huge number of components have to be removed from the locomotive for access to other components and also just for a general inspection and refurbishment as necessary. Steve alluded to some of the volunteers. We have a great bunch of others working away in the background who come regularly to the workshops at Darlington to clean, paint components and generally prepare them for refitting. And the guys, our paid staff and other volunteers, have been really busy in David Wright's workshops in Loughborough as well, removing things from the locomotive and preparing them. So the strip of the locomotive started right at the beginning of February. So removed the cab and then started to prepare the boiler to be removed. Now, you will remember, I hope, that the original intention was that the first of the new boilers that are being manufactured for us in Meiningen was to come and be fitted to the locomotive frames as part of this heavy overhaul. Unfortunately, Steve touched on COVID. The impact of COVID in Germany, and particularly in the Meiningen area, was far more significant than we saw here in the UK. And unfortunately, that delayed significantly the progress on the construction of boiler number 2. So we were forced into a decision which saw the renovation of this boiler as the quickest or the fastest route to get a complete boiler ready to be installed in the frames. So the boiler was stripped from the loco at the very beginning of February and shipped over to Meiningen. Meiningen have been working away on the boiler, replacing a significant number of stays. We've, under David's direction, taken decisions to replace a number of fixed stays with flexible stays to try and improve reliability. And in the pictures from Meiningen, apart from the two hoods, bottom middle, enjoying their picnic lunch in the firebox. Meiningen have cracked on. You can see in this image, and particularly down this side of the boiler here. So mud door being replaced here, it's been cut out here but not yet been welded in. Here are some of the stays that have been replaced with flexible stays, and there's a batch of stays here yet to be replaced. So that was the boiler situation, which has delayed us significantly with the overhaul, because we did not expect to have to spend so much time renovating the original boiler. We expected almost a one-for-one swap, which was the whole benefit of having a spare boiler for Tornado and the P2, such that when we get to this stage, you can take one out, put one in. I mean, that sounds really simple. It's not quite as straightforward as that. Would that it was. But that's where we're at with the current boiler situation. The hydraulic test on this is due 26th, I think, of this month, so next week. And once that hydraulic is complete, we're expecting the boiler to come back to the UK, and it'll come to Darlington, where it'll be reassembled and steam tested before it's reclad and then shipped down to be reunited with the frames. Some other unplanned activity that has caused us some concern. During one of the FTR's fitness to run exams that we were conducting on the locomotive prior to one of our rail tours, we discovered the signs of some movement of one of the major frame stays, which joins the two side frame plates together on the locomotive. And it's this piece here. And you can see where that is buried between the two frames. It carries the front air pump, an air receiver, and the pipework that then is interlaced and travels across it, not just air, steam, pipework, but also electrical conduit. All of that had to come out to allow us to remove the thing. Here it is. There's that is the frame stay. That's the inside space that it fits. Whilst it was out, we took the opportunity to shot blast it and inspect it. And having shot blasted it, we discovered that these red lines are showing signs of cracking or fatigue. So all of that had to be ground out and weld repaired or welded, and then inspected again to make sure that all was well. At the same time, we did some non-destructive testing of other known areas on the locomotive and the locomotive frames and the motion to make sure that all was well. That's what this white spray marking is. Dye penetration testing of both the bolt holes for the frame stay, and also these corners are known areas of stress on locomotive frames. I'm pleased to say that having gone to that effort of non-destructive testing, apart from the minor repairs that I've pointed out to you, all was well. The other big part of an overhaul of this nature is not just putting the thing back together again, but making it look right afterwards. And so there's a huge effort at Darlington, at Loughborough, and elsewhere, preparing components to be refitted to the locomotive. In terms of paint schemes, this is an interesting one.
This is Ian Matthews preparing the dome cover at Darlington. But this is a cladding sheet that Ian prepared, and you can see the paint layers that in the 12 years that we've been operating Tornado. You can see every paint scheme that the Locomotive has carried, from the initial grey that the Loco ran in at the Great Central Railway when it was first unveiled to the public, through apple green, BR green, the BR blue that she carried, apple green again, another period in apple green, followed by the final coat of BR green that we gave her a year or two ago when she came out of West Coast and we unveiled it. But also here, this is the bogie from the front, painted, ready to receive the wheel sets. The tender is in various stages of preparation. The back has been undercoated and glossed. The sides, one side is ready to receive more undercoat and gloss. The other side, where we've been doing a significant amount of welding, has a bit more work to go. I thought, to finish, I thought I'd share with you a small video clip of us reuniting the tender tank with the frames at Loughborough. And I'm sorry, complete plagiarism. This was put together and put out on social media. So some of you may have seen this. It also explains for the odd shape of the video. So one Friday, a team of us met at Loughborough to move the tender tank round from one side of the workshop to the other with two large hydraulic HIAB lorries. We thought we might have to do a tandem lift until we discovered that the big crane that they brought was man enough to do the job on its own. So we put the other one away, picked the tank up, put it on the lorry and drove it round to the other end of the site. We'd wheeled the tender out onto some temporary track outside the building, and after some minor adjustments and a bit of paint underneath the areas where the tank was going to sit, the tank was lifted off and lowered back down. As a view from the other side, that's the side of the tender tank that's had significant metal work welded to it and still has to be painted. And this was the final precision of lowering the tank back into the frames. It was always a risk, but I'm delighted to say that it fitted like a glove, and sighs of relief all around from those of us that were there that the tender tank was reunited quite so successessly in the frames. And so that's all I have for you. I said it would be a gallop, and it was 80, I lied, it wasn't quite 90,000 words, it was 87 pictures. So it was only 87,000 words to get across. That's all I have. What we'll do is we'll take any questions that we might have at the end in the Q&A session. So if you have any questions on what I've presented, please make a note of them. I'll be pleased to answer them at the end once we've got through everything. So I've sowed the seed a little bit for ETCS, and I'm pleased that Rob is now going to come and give us the detail of what he and his team have been doing in terms of fitting the ETCS.
Right. Good morning, everyone. Well, I've been given 10 minutes to do this story, so don't blink. I think I've told some of you about ETCS before, but just as a very quick reminder, ETCS is part of ERTMS, which is the European Railway Traffic Management System, which is a big project across Europe to fit the railways with in-cab signalling. And it's got two main components, the European Train Control System, ETCS, and the GSMR radio system, which of course we already use for voice, but with ETCS it'll be used for data as well. There are 3 levels of ETCS. Level 1 is basically an overlay, and in the UK, TPWS provides effectively the same function as that, so level 1 is not being used in the UK. Level 2 is the level that's being rolled out now, and in its final form, it doesn't require any trackside signals. The train position is provided by things called Eurobalises, which are rather like the TPWS racks that you see, but they're a different design. And the movement authority, in other words, the authority to take a train from one section into another, instead of being provided by a fixed signal, is provided over the radio link from the control centre to the driver. Level 3, which is still kind of in people's mind's eye, there have been some simulations and some prototyping done, but is a few years away, is the so-called moving block signalling, which was originally, as you may remember, going to be installed on the West Coast main line many years ago, but has not been implemented really on any significant railways, other than a few specific areas. So, if we look at ETCS at the moment, and many of you will know that there's been an ETCS installation running on the Cambrian Coast Railway for a number of years. This was an earlier version of it, and it is level 2, so there are no line-side signals. And any ETCS system requires quite a significant installation in the cab and around the vehicle of any engine or train that's going to run onto an ETCS railway. And there's been quite a lot of debate and discussion over many years about whether ETCS could be implemented on steam locomotives. And we've always been pretty sure that it could be, and it's just a question of engineering. Now we're having to prove that. So the program that we're involved with is the East Coast Digital Program, and this is a major engineering project to upgrade the signalling system on the East Coast Main Line between King's Cross and Edinburgh, starting with the southern section between King's Cross and Stoke Tunnel, south of Grantham. And it will have no line-side signals. So that means after it's implemented, every train, engine operating on that line will have to be fitted with ETCS, or it'll have to be towed by an ETCS-fitted vehicle. Otherwise, it won't be allowed there at all. And obviously, we want to do that, so we're in the front of the queue for fitting ETCS. So we're in partnership with Network Rail, with SNC Lavalin, and with Thales to fit ETCS to an initial set of 3 locomotives. So the A1, an LMS Black 5, and one of the preserved Deltics will be fitted first. And we believe we will be the first steam locomotive in the world to be fitted with ETCS. So it's quite an interesting project. So very fortunately, we've been able to carry out a lot of the enabling work for ETCS during the overhaul. So it's been operating in parallel with the overhaul, and we've made good use of the overhaul timescale to do this enabling work. We're pretty well complete on the enabling works, and we'll be ready to start installing the ETCS equipment at the end of November. So you won't be able to see the detail of this diagram, but the key issue really for ETCS on a steam locomotive is power. And the Thales ETCS equipment, which is typical of most of the ETCS equipment available, consumes more than twice the amount of power of all of the existing systems on the A1. And so although we've got a very substantial power supply on the A1, a more significant one than on any other steam locomotive, we still need to upgrade this power supply to deliver this additional power. But because of the scalability of our architecture, we're able to do that by effectively extending the same architecture and adding a new power supply. So we're fitting a second turbogen, and this is a new one that have been manufactured in Meiningen, and you'll see one actually at the works later on. We've designed a new axle-driven alternator, which is currently on test under our coach, and we're installing a pair of high-capacity batteries. Our existing ones are 68 amp hour, these are 100 amp hour batteries. The changes to the tender have been very significant. Really, the wiring has been massively changed. So because the tender had to come apart for other things, we've taken the opportunity to completely rewire the tender. So we've got quite an interesting job of integrating the new ETCS power system with the rest of the locomotive, and I won't go into the detail of this, but we can take advantage of the 2 existing battery systems and chargers, etc., to act as backup. So we only need 1 additional set of batteries. Other steam locomotives will have to have 2 power supplies built in for ETCS, but we only need 1 extra one because we've got 2 already. And we're putting a new switch box on to control that. So the Enabling Works programme covers all the preparation work for fitting of ETCS. And you might think, well, that just is bringing a box and bolting it on, but it's not quite that simple on a steam engine, because one of the key things is we have very little space actually on a steam engine, and the space that we do have is used for other things. So every cubic centimetre or cubic inch that we take away for ETCS equipment might be a cubic inch of space for coal or water, and that's at a premium. So we have to be clever in the way we do things. And we also want to try and preserve as much of the aesthetics of the cab as we possibly can, and there's a lot of new equipment to go into the cab. So there's a lot of work to do on both the engine and the cab, and there's just a few slides here to summarise some of the things we've been doing. Well, SNCL has had a wonderful job. They've gone to town on this. They've produced a very large number of new drawings, over 150 drawings just for us, and over 100 drawings for the electrical system and harnesses that have gone to Thales to be built up. And here are just a few examples of the drawings. They are rather beautiful drawings. They're all done on CAD, but they go into the very greatest detail on everything. And many of the drawings need to have digital transfer files produced for them, DXF files, which we can then feed directly into profiling machines to cut the metalwork. A whole set of schematics have been produced. Fortunately, we don't need to worry about these. I just observe them and say that looks very nice, because they go straight from SNCL to Thales, who've then got to build the system and install it and switch it on and see if it works. I've just got to get the power supply working, so that's enough for us. But here's just a couple of their schematics for the EVC and the DMIs in the cab. We have to have two driver-machine interfaces, one for going forward and one for going in reverse. And there's a few CAD renderings here of the front of the tender, which is where most of this is going. And you can see in the right-hand picture there, we've had to cut into the coal space. We've used mostly coal space and only a tiny amount of water, because water is so precious to us. And generally, we're okay on coal, apart from one notable one where we had one lump left, but that's only happened once. So we're pretty happy about that. Here's a bit more detail, which once again we don't have time to go into, but I'm very happy to talk to people about. There's a few things you can see here. For example, this is the GSMR radio locker here, which is very similar to the current one we have. The radio unit is behind. This is the EVC, or the European Vital Computer rack, behind here, and there's a whole set of other ETCS equipment in these cubicles here. Just looking at the front here, this is our new I/O panel, which I've designed with Alan Parkin. We'll be building. This is the ETCS equivalent to the two panels that are under the seats at the moment. So the power supply, as I said, is based on the architecture we have at the moment, and we're responsible for delivering the power supply. And it involves quite a lot of changes to both the engine and the tender, and there's a few slides here just summarising some of the progress. We knew that a lot of the conduit on the tender, although it was installed new back in 2008, has had a hard time, and the front of the tender is probably the worst environment for really anything that you could imagine, and the conduit there is rotted right through. And there are also places underneath the tender where the conduit had rotted through, so we had no choice but to replace it all. So that's all now been done. This is the power supply in my workshop, built up as a prototype system with all the key elements being tested, and we've load tested it to about 1.7 times the power that ETCS will take, and I soak tested it for a week until I got bored and then said that's good enough. So that's all ready to go. And this is the schematic for the I/O panel. This is the protection. It's effectively a distribution board. And you can see the panel layout there with all of the MCBs protecting the ETCS. And the main switch here allows us to connect the ETCS either to its own battery or to our auxiliary or essential batteries. And then there's various metering, etc. at the top for monitoring it. And quite a bit of wiring needed on the engine. And here's Paul doing some wiring at the back of the engine around the battery box. This is where we need to have an additional wiring for the shore power input, which obviously we've got to be able to connect shore power as well as the connections to the existing systems. And again, at the front of the engine there, preparing for the second turbojam to be fitted. Hugh talked a bit about the tender frames. Obviously, they were taken right back to bare metal, ready for our conduit to go on. And you can see the front of the tender there stripped, ready for the major work in welding to that. And here's some of the structured conduit system that we've installed, and this has all been designed by Alan Parkin. And it's the same design as we've used on the P2, so we were able to use the same principles. And it's all in stainless steel now, so it's stainless steel trunking and stainless steel boxes, so it will not rot. And that should be good for quite a long time. So most of my design is done on CAD now, but when it comes to looking at putting harnesses onto a vehicle, we've got 27 new harnesses on the tender, and each of those needs to be made up and pulled through one or more conduits on the tender from source to destination. And picturing this to help the guys install it is one thing that I think is still probably better done in pencil. So that's the sketch that I did, which Alan and Andy seem to make to work in pulling the harnesses through. So. And here's a couple of schematics. The one on the left is one of the connection boxes. Remember those stainless steel boxes we saw before, all the connections in that box. And then these two here are all of the 27 harnesses, every wire net, the wire dimensions and lengths of harnesses and all of the idents for them. And here's Andy Meredith of LMS and Alan making up the harnesses. Cleanliness is really important here. What you don't want to do is to pull bits of swarf through your conduit system, because over the years that little bit of swarf with all of the vibration will vibrate its way through a cable insulation, and then you get an intermittent fault, and we don't want any of them. So we are really, really careful with that, as we were on the engine originally. And here's Paul again with Alan doing the identing of the wiring on the rear of the tender, because the tank came off, we had to disconnect all of the lighting on the back of the tender, so that all had to be re-idented, and it's now packed up ready for reconnection. And there's been a lot of interest from the industry in this project, and in particular from Network Rail, and we were very privileged to have a visit from Tufik, who's the Digital Railway Director for Network Rail, who came to see us on the 3rd of August, and we had a lovely day for it actually, and so we and SNCL showed him around what we were doing and talked about everything. And he has a very good engineering background. He asked some really good questions, so it was a good day. So we also had to modify our existing I/O panels. So we need to provide for the outputs from the existing panels into the ETCS system. So these had to be dismantled because they're all on top of each other, because David Elliott didn't allow me enough room for it back in the day. So it's fairly packed in, so you have to take all the MCBs off to get the wiring behind. But it's a useful exercise because you can inspect behind it and make sure everything's all right. So that's all now being completed, and they're ready to go back on the engine. And here's the wiring system. This is the front of the tender. On the left you can see, and that large box there is what we call the umbilical connection box, the box for the harnesses, the jumpers between the engine and tender, and the connectors will go on the front of that box. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of wiring there. All that has to be re-terminated. And on the right, there's the start of the wiring of the insides of the two boxes on the back of the tender, and the rest of that will be done very soon. We won't go into too much detail on the front of the tender. This has been a major job and a significant challenge for LMS, and in particular for their coded welder, Adam, who's done a really amazing job. Of course, the ETCS requires very accurate dimensions for all of these equipment racks, because all the equipment racks, the new stuff's got to feed in exactly. And of course the tender was built in a perfectly acceptable way for a tender being built for a steam locomotive, so the sides weren't really very straight and things weren't quite where we expected them to be. So that's been a lot of work for LMS, working with SNCL to get everything right, but they put the time in, and it's a good job, and they made up mock-ups of the main equipment and made sure that it all fits, and it does. So the turbogen switch box at the front of the engine is my design, and we need to be able to switch the two turbogens between all the various loads. So we're putting a new box on the front of the frames, and everyone says, well, surely it's just a switch. Well, actually, it requires quite a lot more. We've put in a tacho circuit so that we can run up the turbogens and then connect them to the load only when they're running up to speed. And you can see there the layout on the right there of what's got to go into that box as I was doing the mechanical arrangement before starting to wire everything up. So that's kind of my whistle-stop tour, and the tender's now back in one piece, as Hugh said. The cab's been stripped out and shot blasted, and that's ready for installing all of the ETCS equipment. There's a lot of additional bracketry and studs, etc. going into that. The brake box is also stripped out. That's being completely rebuilt because there are a whole set of ETCS components, because the ETCS has to be able to put the brakes on as well. I'm constructing the turbogen switch box now, and the ETCS I/O panel is away for manufacture, and I'll be building that next. And I thought I'd finish with Hugh's excellent picture of the tender in the sunshine complete. So that's me done. Thank you very much.
just about still. Good morning, everybody. Lovely to see everyone. And a great thank you to Rob for that presentation, which you usually ask us questions. We might ask you a few later and see if anyone was paying attention. But I think for most of us, we leave the boffinry to Rob on that because it's a hell of an undertaking. And if anyone was wondering whether it could be done, the answer has always been yes, but crikey, what a lot of stuff has to happen to make it done. Anyway, we've seen a lot of engineering now and that kind of thing. I'm going to talk very briefly a little about what we're going to be doing with the Locomotive in the new year. So, as we announced when we were together last time, and you would have seen, we've now got our new brand, which we're rolling out, 21st Century Steam. And you'll remember that we talked about the issue that you can have Tornado right up until the point that you've got Prince of Wales, and then it potentially gets confusing. It's not confusing to us because we're all part of it, but it's confusing to members of the general public who may just dip in and out, only see us one time, only touch us via the website or an advert or something like that. So 21st Century Steam, and you'll start to see that rolling out more and more. So new brochures, new on-train literature, that kind of thing. So we then look to our core activity, which is the Aberdonian. I'm very pleased to say, despite the best efforts of COVID-19 and all the shenanigans that we all had to manage through there, it is still a very popular train and the ridership is continuing to grow. We will run, within reason, as many trains as we can fill because it's quite an easy train to run compared to some of the things that we do. And once you've worked out how to do a train well, you can just keep repeating it. So you refine it, you make it easier, you make it efficient. We've added in the Clyde Aberdonian from Glasgow, and particularly important because it gives you the whole Ayrshire commuter belt into Glasgow and northwest Glasgow as well out towards Locomotive. And if anybody knows that area, it's a fairly well-heeled part of the west of Scotland and therefore of interest to us. We do get as well unbelievable support from Scotland's railways, and I use that term in its widest view. So ScotRail themselves, Network Rail in Scotland, and Transport Scotland, which are the civil servants. Normally a boo would be the order of the day for civil servants, a few of them in the room. I used to be one. But no, in Scotland, I just wish we got that level of cooperation down in England and Wales. And those railway colleagues in the room will share that one. And Steve mentioned, and very pleased to have Richard Corser from DB Cargo with us today. We're obviously now implementing our new partnership and new agreement, which works closely with the SRPS as well. And that allows long-term planning and stability because the Aberdonian has attracted the attention of several tour companies who want to build it in as part of a 5 or 6 day tour in Scotland. And they don't work on 6-month horizons. They work on 18 months minimum, usually 2 years plus. So that stability is important. So that's Scotland, that's the summer. And I think most of the time, everybody knows that from mid-July to mid-September, Tornado will be in Scotland. We can bring it south, of course, if anyone's got a particularly special reason to do so, but ideally we leave it there. But we're looking into the spring. So in February, we'll be testing all that wiring that Rob was showing us. And it will all go fabulously well, I'm sure, touching wood. And that will tie up the Loco until the back end of March. From there, we will run a few tours before Easter. So the first one, and it is on the back of your little brochure, is the South Devon Express. So we'll run that from Worcester, Cheltenham, Bristol, etc. south, and visit the Paignton Dartmouth Steam Railway. We haven't been there for years. I haven't checked it. It's at least 6 years, we think. And obviously, our supporters in the southwest are very keen to see Tornado down there and to travel with us. I often get emails about that one, and therefore I will be getting less emails, and hopefully people will be looking. And while we're down there, it would be a shame not to go to Cornwall, because we've only been to Cornwall once, so it seems we ought to go again. And we're going to do Bristol to Newquay. Now, Newquay does not happen very often with steam. This one was, you want to go where? And it's like, well, we're already in Par, so why don't we go to the seaside? So it's the scenery you go for, not necessarily Newquay, before anybody thinks I've lost my mind. But we are looking at doing it. The strength of the partnership with DB Cargo comes to play there, because they're the only operator with a permanent depot and permanent driving staff in Cornwall. So we can use those strengths. And
It'll be a bit of a different tour. We won't go there very often, so if you do want to do Tornado over the Luxulian Valley and elsewhere, book on that train. And then one that people are aware of, the first time Tornado will go to Harrogate, and we're taking the beautiful Belmont British Pullman with us on that date. And that'll be a traditional run up the East Coast, and then we'll dive off and go and visit Harrogate. We are, because of strikes and various other things going on, it is difficult to get too much further ahead, but we are working hard on getting that gap between the 1st of April as it is there and when we're in Scotland in mid-July. And just to talk about some of the further things that we're going to do in 2023, we're looking to be in the West Midlands, so for destinations that start from there. So you're going to be thinking about places like the Settle and Carlisle, Shap, those kind of areas that we want to visit there. We will probably do 1 or 2 tours out of London in the summer, and then after we've been to Scotland in late summer, for me the second half of September is late summer because you always get the good weather. We'll be in the northeast near our home here. Christmas is still being developed because the demand on locomotives at Christmas, and it's actually causing concern this year because we aren't around, is to, I could run 3 engines at Christmas and still have them all busy. So we're looking at what we do and what our promoter colleagues want to book us for. We will always run a good number of trains, but we want to get the balance right, as we've always said, between those that we promote and take the risk on ourselves and those that others pay us to use the loco and they take the risk. And then just to move on finally on preserve lines, Great Central, I think we've heard about that a little bit through the morning. The loco will go to the Great Central for running in after all that work that we've just been hearing about. We'll be at the Nene Valley Railway at Easter. Rumours there might be a Deltic there as well. I think they're fancying an East Coast mainline bash, which sounds very acceptable. While we're in Scotland, we'll look at the Bowness and Kinneil. They've asked us if they can have a weekend, and given the amount of support and help they give us, it would be rude not to. And we have a couple of summer requests in as well. One of them I know will happen, but I'm not allowed to tell you what it is, and you can guess as much as you like. I'm on pain of death not to say. But it will be a nice visit when it does come out, and we will make sure everybody knows very soon. But they've asked for the contract, so it's going to happen. So that's keeping up that tempo, 3-4 preserve lines per year, recognising that that's the time when you can get really up close to the loco and travel behind it, and more accessible in price terms, we recognise. So that's all I wanted to say about the schedule for next year, give everybody a feel for what's happening. I'm now going to hand on to Richard and Ben, who are going to talk to us a little more about the P2. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Richard Courtney Harris, and I was handed the job of coordinating the P2 project, which I'm delighted to be able to do. The meat of this presentation will follow from Ben, but and I'm just his warm-up act. I just wanted to put 1 or 2 headlines, if you like, around this, because this has been a difficult year in every single respect of what the Trust has been doing. It's been particularly difficult for the P2 project, because as Steve explained, we've had a lot of stuff coming at us simultaneously, and we've had to do all of it, well, most of it, because the one thing that could move, and we've been able to move, has been the P2 project. So in terms of where we would like to have been, we're probably not there this year. And, you know, the reasons for that, you've heard all of that, and I won't repeat that. But, and it's worth stressing this, we are, and we have achieved one hell of a lot this year, and Ben will take you through that in a minute. I think the takeaway from that is that we've been up against significant headwinds on the P2 project, but we are marching on solidly, and I think that's quite important to take away. The other thing I'd like to mention, because it's a wonderful thing, is the cylinder block, which you will see today, those of you who come down to DLW. It is a magnificent piece of engineering. I actually sat there yesterday and I was completely in awe of it. And at this point, I should acknowledge the work that David has done to redesign that lump of metal. And when you see it, I guarantee it will take your breath away. In fact, I half wondered whether we shouldn't have commissioned 2 of these, polished one up, offered it to the Tate Modern for about 4 million quid, and we would have actually done quite well out of that. Finally, before, as I said, we get to Ben, I just want to offer a vote of thanks, particularly to you, our supporters, because the stuff you see, the stuff you hear about, frankly, would never happen without you. And we are very, very aware of that as trustees. So many thanks to you, really. Thank you very much indeed. I should also acknowledge the staff, whether they be paid or volunteer staff, because they are solidly backs behind this. And I know it's kind of iniquitous to single people out, but, and David, as you know, has been instrumental in getting this to where it is. But I would also like to single out Terry Graham, who's been the project manager on the P2 for about 2 years now, isn't it, Terry? It's quite a long time. And he has kept this thing firmly on track. Against all these buffeting headwinds, Terry has managed this through some pretty difficult times. So I would like to personally offer my thanks publicly to Terry for everything he's done, and long may it continue. Ben.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Richard. I've just got a couple of slides to go through a bit of the progress on the P2 this year, and there's more technical detail that we'll go into this afternoon whenever we're down in Darlington. So the first one, as Richard touched on, is the cylinder block. So we placed the order for that all the way back in August 2021, and we got to that point by having a series of companies come to us when we put out a tender. We went through a selection process and visited all of the different suppliers, and eventually picked Hyco as the best partner for this. So they've now finished the main fabrication, and we can go through the detail of how they constructed all of that, how they broke it down into the different bits, and the 3D model that you may well have seen that David produced to help them with that. It's now here. It's primarily finished. Most of the machining's done. It needs the liners shrunk fit into it, and then the seats for the valves will go in and they'll be machined as well. Then there's a whole series of covers that need to be made to box the whole thing up. It'll then be hydraulic tested. Once that's successfully done, it'll get painted, and then it should come back to us. So we'll be very pleased whenever that arrives, and we can then look at fitting it into the frames on the engine. Much of the work that's been going on has been sort of focused around the valve gear and the cam boxes now. So David and Alan and Martin and the team have managed to get all the design work nearly complete, and they're in the process of creating somewhere in the region of over 100 different sets of drawings for this. The aim is to try and get one cam box manufactured in the next 6 months, 3 to 6 months, that we can use as a test for a life testing rig for the valves. Once that's done and running, we can then look at making the other cam box, or 2 if we decide we want to make a second one for that. And the final part of it is then the actual valve profile. So that's where I've sort of come in to lend a bit of a hand with my experience in the automotive industry. We have a lot of data from South African engines and from American applications of the Lentz valve gear, but we need to design the cam profile itself to get the right lift profiles for the P2. So what we're going to do is look out to a technology partner, someone like Cosworth, Mala or AVL, who are well versed in doing this for automotive technology companies, and they will help us to translate what we want as a valve lift through the rocker and all the different bits of the orientation back to the actual cam profile that we need, because it's not quite as simple as a 10mm high cam for a 10mm high valve lift. There's lots of various bits of geometry to make it work. So hopefully we'll see some progress on that in the coming months. As most people have alluded to, Meiningen have had some challenges, not just with COVID, but also with trying to deal with the A1's boiler. So the P2's first boiler, the first new one now, has taken a bit of a back seat, but they have still been progressing. As you can see in the pictures in our latest visit over in August we went back over, they've got a new 5-axis drilling machine, so they're busy in the process of setting up and drilling the inner firebox, ready for it to be dropped into the outer shell, and then all the stays to be put in. Meanwhile, back in Darlington, the team have been working at the pony truck, so it is complete, but there is some rework being done on the liners on the cannon boxes. So that's now at Triple T, and we're waiting for the welder down at LMS, as Rob's been keeping him very busy with the ETCS work. Once he's freed up from that, he'll be able to weld up the manganese liners that need to go onto it for them to be remachined, and then we should have it all finished and assembled. And he's quite well versed in that because he's had to do quite a lot of that welding on the manganese liners for the A1 as well. So he's probably not looking forward to that too much, I imagine. The motion is a major step forward, so we've now got the leading and trailing connecting rods all in place on the engine, and I think later on, if you haven't seen it, there's a couple of videos of it being motored around in the same fashion that was done on the A1. We've also got the connecting rod, which has all been polished up as well now by Ian Matthews, and ready for assembly when we get to that point. So it's all starting to look like a complete engine at the bottom end at least now. While all that's been happening, and while a lot of the resource has been away at Loughborough trying to look at the boiler and the rest of the A1, there's been work going on all the bits and pieces in the background. So Alan Parkin and the team have been trying to fit all of the pipe work and the conduiting. You can see some of it here hidden out of the way. You'll have seen more of it in Hugh's pictures earlier of the A1. This is all the stuff that has to go in behind the scenes. So we're trying to fit it in now while progress is a bit slow otherwise, so that we don't get to the point where we fit the boiler, we fit the tender, we fit the cylinder block. It's a big rush, and then there's a year's break while we're doing all the nitty-gritty bits behind, so we can try and keep a bit of pace and momentum with it, which should be good. ETCS is a big thing as well. It's going to be fitted to the P2. So thankfully, the similarity between the A1 and the P2 has meant that Rob has been able to do an excellent job with the design, so that we should be able to port everything over to the P2. That does mean we're going to have to do a bit of rework on the tender that we've already got, but hopefully it shouldn't be quite as painful as it's been on the A1 by having done it and knowing what exactly we've got to cut and where exactly everything's going to fit. And that's probably mechanically the largest bit of work that needs to be finished on it. But that work will be done probably when we've got the tender finished, and sometime next year, I would say, once we've thoroughly tested the A1's ETCS and decided if we need any reworks and modifications to the final design. And lastly, we have acquired 35457, which is going to be the support coach for the P2. It's currently at the Great Central in a similar fashion to the way we had the A1. It's now attached to their dining train, and it's running there, which keeps it in use, keeps all the certification and assessment procedures underway, which keeps it mainline registered. And while I was there last year, or earlier in the year in January when we were there, we took the opportunity to put the A1 along behind 35457, which is the first time one of our engines has been with one of our coaches. Once we've got it sort of ready and we need it with the P2, we'll have to take it and do some work. It's a fairly basic standard brake coach at the moment, but we'll obviously want to make it a bit easier for us so it's a bit nicer to live in. The kettle, I don't think is particularly good, is it? So it'll need something a bit more industrial for that. Yeah, we'll need another one, please. So we'll fit that and then make the rest of the living interior much more habitable for us. We'll do some of the external bodywork. The intention will be to get it to the same excellent standard as we have for the A1's coach, but that's probably going to take a little bit longer as funds permit and we have time to do that. So we'll get it serviceable and habitable, and then we'll build on that from there. So that's everything from me. As I say, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but we do have the opportunity for some more Q&A bits and more technical detail when we get to Darlington later on. So I think now I'm going to hand over to Chris, who has some of the exciting financial details for us.
Right, morning, well, afternoon everybody now. Group financials, usually the most boring bit of the morning, I'm sure, but it's important, I think, that you understand why we're not where we hope to be. To put it mildly, it's been an interesting year from a financial point of view. The pre-COVID plan was, as you've heard, that... Sorry, is that better? The pre-COVID plan was that 2 boilers were going to be ordered, and the Tornado overhaul would therefore just be a boiler swap. For reasons you've heard, that's not happened. We've also had to accumulate sufficient funds to ensure the Tornado overhaul, but of course COVID intervened in that. And then the plan to move to DLW has come along, and of course, as has been said, we have no control over the timescale for that. It's been driven by Darlington Borough Council as part of the 2025 celebrations. As you've again already heard, we then had to prepare Tornado for ETCS operations, which was sensibly decided to do during the major overhaul. And we were already committed to ordering the P2 cylinder block and confirming the completion of the tender frames. So the boiler plan originally, as I said, was the first of 2 new boilers coming in for Tornado, the second for Prince of Wales, and Tornado's existing boiler will be removed as part of the overhaul and basically stored away until such time as we had accumulated the funds and would have sent it then back to Germany to be refurbished. Unfortunately, we've now had to do that now, and from a financial point of view, it basically means that we have had to pay for the refurbishment of the boiler some 4 to 5 years before we were planning to do so, and that has caused us major problems on the financial front. So the actuality is that we have now got to sort out the boiler payment. We've got to sort out the cost of the moving to DLW2, because clearly all the workshop stuff has got to be moved, and the P2 itself will have to be moved across sometime next year. And we need to get Tornado ETCS ready also for early 2023 network rail testing, so that we're ready to go on the East Coast Main Line as and when. So that's just a summary of the financial impact. The bottom line is that we are extremely stretched for cash, mainly as a cash flow issue. Network Rail are paying for the work doing on Tornado for the ETCS, but of course we have to do the work and then invoice Network Rail before they'll pay us. So there's a time lag there, and we will eventually recover all of this cost, because eventually when we do send the boiler for refurbishment, when we do the next overhaul that needs a refurbished boiler, we'll already have it in stock, because it will have come back next year sometime and just be sitting there ready. So in the medium to long term, I'm sure our finances will be reasonably healthy. The problem is, in the short term, we do have a need for as much cash as you're prepared to give us. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've been asked to say a few words about Covenant Care and Covenant of Communications. First of all, one admin issue. Are any of you failing to receive email or electronic communications from us? If you are, can you please get in touch? Obviously, the last thing we want is our precious communications to you ending up in your spam folders. So if you can contact the office by some way and make sure that you are cleared for communications, it would be very important. We do want to stay in touch with you. We do love you, really, honestly. And we couldn't live without our covenanters, that's for sure. I think we've had an interesting year. One of the reasons I'm here standing before you is because we are now looking for a significant number of new volunteers. We had Mark and Mandy Grant, for family reasons, have both stepped down from their respective roles, having done an absolutely superb job. I believe Charles Tremere very kindly has stepped up for the role of volunteer liaison, but we still need a significant number of additional volunteers. I will get on to the number of roles of that in a minute. Tony Watson also, bless him, has done a fantastic job as our photo archivist, has stepped down from that role as well. We are looking urgently for a new photo archivist, because although, even though we're out of traffic, the photographic record keeps pouring in of everything that we do, and it needs recording and logging
and tucking away in the archive, which is frankly huge. We have probably now tens and tens of thousands of images in there. We did put out an appeal a while ago for historical images. We still keep them coming. We'd love to see any interesting or photographic records from the past that you'd care to share with us. Again, license them to the trust, and in theory, we can make money out of them. So, please, that would be a huge help. Sorry, just going to quickly flick through all these various things that we need to do. So, just quickly, some of the volunteer roles we need to fill. We need to recruit a company secretary. We need someone who will generate and compile our annual reports. We need, in addition to the photo archivist, an archivist would be a helpful role to fill as well. We need someone to lead the merchandising side, which is a critical source of income when Tornado is in traffic. We have had an offer of a videographer, but if anyone has videography skills, we need a video editor. We are still looking for more works guides, so you need to be local to Darlington and available on the first and third Saturdays of the month in particular when the works is open, and it's quite an important thing. We do open twice a month for various reasons. Sorry about this, the list goes on. Support crew, train stewards, workshop staff, merchandisers. It's just never ending. So if you think you can volunteer, please come and see me, talk to Charles or talk to the office staff, but please leave us your names and numbers and addresses so we can get hold of you. Sorry, just quickly checking through here. That's great. Although, obviously, legacies and clubs generate a significant amount of money, and it is massively appreciated, and we have had some good legacies, the absolute core of this business has always been the recruitment of covenanted income. And we obviously massively appreciate all of you here who are covenanting, but if you can also tell a friend, get other people on board, it's vital that we continue to put new covenanters in, because I'm afraid, because of Anno Domini, we inevitably lose a few each year, and we need to keep packing covenanters in. And the best way is by talking to them, without doubt, is talking to someone and persuading them to join this incredible cause. I think that's more or less I need to cover, so unless my colleagues have got anything else. No? Right, great stuff.
Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see so many people here. And as Steve said, one of my key roles is the delivery of our new home. Across the tracks on the Bishop Auckland line, not too far away from where we are. And as Ben said, we've got a P2 to move. It might only be a few hundred yards, but it'll be a low loader and a crane, and masses and masses of equipment and assets to shift as well. So where are we on our new home? It's been talked about for what seems like forever, and I think many of you will have seen the artist's impression of the Rail Heritage Quarter and our part in it. There we have a bit of a colourless building. That was about a year ago, shows the North Road station and a link across from us into the rest of the Heritage Quarter. But things have moved on. As we alluded, May 23 is staring us really in the face. That's when it's scheduled for completion. It ain't far away, is it? What will it do for us? 4 build maintenance bays compared to the single slot we've got. And it's a momentous time in the Trust's history, it really is. But I would say that, wouldn't I? Never mind all the engineering stuff. Let's get into here and do some more. So it does transform our output ability. Previous slide, you saw the footbridge link. We are part of the wider Heritage Quarter that Darlington Borough Council Tees Valley Combined Authority are putting together. £35 million investment in the town. On top of that, there's another 23 million to improve the route from the town centre up to the Heritage Quarter. So there's a massive amount of investment as a legacy for the future. You know, 1975 was great, but it was kind of a one-off celebration. Looking forward, this will really leave a legacy beyond 2025. So we have on top of the bridge that takes public into a viewing gallery. They can come across, you know, at their own rate and look down onto the workshops. And doubtless they'll probably want to shout, comment, or ask whether we're doing the right thing. For me, one of the absolute major parts of this project is we become connected to the national rail network. You know, Allalees do a fine job whenever an engine comes back to the works, but it's an expensive job bringing them on low loaders. So it transforms our operation, but it transforms the North East. We can then have numerous rail tours being worked in with heritage locos that can then be serviced before they turn around and go back. So where are we? What's it look like now? For those who haven't seen it, we've got the current works in the background, although technically the right-hand side of it is the Nelpeg. This has sprung up out of the ground. I mean, it was one of the wonders with steel work that it pops up quickly, but they've been doing a marvellous job. This was about a couple of weeks ago. It's moved further since. For us, it is a major part of our presence in the Rail Heritage Quarter. However, it's not our only presence. Some who've been in past conventions may recall us having aspirations to move into the Peachy Shed, the 1861 building further down, which is hugely derelict. I thought it'd be helpful for you to see the full site as how it will impact on us and how we'll use it, and also look at some of the commitments that we've got to Darlington Borough Council. So I mentioned the 1861 shed. Whilst the bulk of our operations are in the works building, we've secured half of the 1861 shed, primarily for storage. Now that means we could then have 3 locos, 3 support coaches under cover, and you know, measure, although the new works building had to shrink a wee bit because of financial pressures, that will still take the A1 and the P2 in line and under cover. So it's no small facility. Part of our commitments in return for a negligible rent of a £5 million building is delivering and installing all the track that serves the works and our element of the 1861 shed. Now the site is kind of almost a kilometre and a half long, so it's no mean feat really. There are 2 inspection pits, one in the shed, one outside for operations, and we're committed to funding those. Separately, you may recall the suggestion of a turntable. Darlington Borough Council have now submitted a levelling up application to fund the turntable and a number of other bits and pieces. And so what does the track layout look like? It is long, it is thin. You may well have seen this before. I just thought that it could be helpful to see it from a different perspective to understand just what it actually means as a new site for us. So I'm not going to be the videographer or whatever we're called, but here's some rudimentary photography. Bottom left is the end of the up goods line that's currently very rarely used. Left-hand side, we've got the Bishop Auckland line heading out to Shildon. The solid red line you see there is some of what we're about to lay or over the next couple of years. You come off the up goods, which is a great benefit and made it affordable in as much as, you know, usually talking 3 million to put a new connection into the main line. We just blindly connect to the end of this route. Then trains will come and locos will come back down through a run-round loop. So to understand that little scribble of a drawing, hopefully this will work. but it's an aerial run of the site. Now, on the left is a massive building, some may be familiar with, is the old rolling mills. The tree line effectively forms a run of what should be a 26-mile walking and cycling route from Bristleton Incline down to Stockton. Aspirations at 26 miles and a bit for it to be a marathon course. Question is, why have we stopped at this bit, unassuming part of the site? Well, we mentioned the commitment to the track. In the last 2 weeks, we've taken delivery of 3.6 kilometres of flat-bottom rail off another project, which was my day job. 200 rails out of Northumberland, been renewed as part of the Northumberland line from Ashington to Newcastle. We secured that, trying to work the best value for money at half the price of scrap rail. So, it's been a bit of a coup, and thankfully it's under CCTV. So that's kind of good too. They sit there on the left. You can go to see 300 or some of 375 sleepers donated by Nexus, the Tyne and Wear people. That cost us the cost of transportation. So we're taking it from whoever will provide, really. Separately, we've got some other sleepers coming in January. We need another 1,600, and they're like, but we've already got 1,200 of those. So moving on, there's the rails, and we've delivered our commitment for that element. Heading on down, see there just on the right-hand side the buffer stops, which will form the entry to the site, and you begin to see the 1861 shed. On the one hand, it looks more derelict than it ever has done, but actually that's because, excitingly, the renovation has started. It's, I don't know how many years since it's been visible without trees, fences, skips and everything else, but a particular sunny day, that's where we are at the moment. But how's it going to be used? Let's look at our partners in the setup. I think I mentioned before, we've got the south end, although it says Nelpeg, you might wonder why, but the Darlington Railway Preservation Society are in the north end, technically northwest, and the shed is cut in half. The south end, 3 roads for us, but our partners in the other half of the current works, the North East Local Preservation Group, will have a short-term use of the middle road in return for us trying to secure their presence in Darlington. Longer term, it'll return to the Trust, and so that'll help to keep all 3 locos and coaches undercover when we need to. You see this a fine collection of scrap cars. The scrap dealer, Howard, was a tenant of Network Rail, now of the council. He moves out in or before June next year, which then allows the clearance of the whole site. Because inevitably, of course, rails into our side of the building will need to run right across there. So we head south, coming back towards Otley Terrace, which is the underbridge, just near where the current works are. And you begin to see the construction site of our new works. Top right there, you've got the current carriage works, DLW and Nelpeg, and here's the latest progress. If you look, there's kind of sparkly sparks in the front of the building. This was 2 days ago. It's track work, actively cutting and installing the rails inside the building. So, that's how far it's progressing. And the rail is a big pile of 26 chunks of rail gone in there. You see it's correlation with the head of steam, North Road Station there, and all of this becomes the Rail Heritage Quarter. and the bridge comes up and then into the side of the building. So a feel for what it will look like. That little banjo area of land, which has got porter cabins on at the moment, that will be where the turntable comes in, subject to the levelling up application. Even if that funding isn't successful, that siding will be needed, effectively as a runoff and protection. We've got a bit of an interesting incline off the end of Otley Terrace into the shed, so operational safety reasons will have the point set away from the shed as a normal position. Bit of conclusion, a bit of a view, and again, it changes so quickly, but 2 weeks ago, a feel for just how much progress has been made possible. You see in the background what is Morrison's, what was the old works till the 60s. And I think my uncle's bench was just over there. What you see there, the big hole in the side of the building is where the bridge will come through. So it's, yeah, hopefully everyone's enthused and excited by it. But what's it mean for next steps? Yeah, we're planning the relocation. It's a big job, you know. There's just loads to do. The track, you know, we know orders of magnitude of cost for track. The PUA gang has launched, hugely thankful for everyone's contribution and support for that. We're up at £23,000 at the moment in such a short time, and that's without gift aid benefits. That is only a small part, of course. That covers the plain line, it covers the sleepers, the delivery. We've got 8 sets of points to find. I found 5 of them, just need to be able to afford them. Another bit out in Northumberland. We've got a set outside of the works, but there's a load to do. We worked out just how many thousand tons of ballast we need for a 1.8 kilometre run. So there's a big amount. Now, the funding route is likely to be long-term loan, either through a rent or some other facility. The more that people can support us, the less that gap to fund is, and therefore the easier position for the annual costs that we face. We're linking into the track lane organisations, particularly the military. There's a 507 regiment, and one of the permanent army regiments are keen to get back into track civil engineering. We'll take their free labour. We're not proud. But all of this which will mean we should have a mainline connection for the back end of 2024. It needs carefully phasing. We can do it when we've got the funding. As Chris said, as Steve said, everyone has pointed out, you know, there's a bucket load that we've got to achieve and deliver, and we're on with it. But it'll be done in a structured way. You know, it's not just going to be wagons rolling in and laying 3.6 kilometres of track in no time at all. It will be done in a managed and considered way. And, you know, with your support, it's hugely appreciated. And if you want to give us some more support, that's great too. That's our new home. Hopefully, you're excited as I am.
It's me again. Thank you, Paul. I think what we've found is a variety of new skills have been learnt, and Paul now's got a drone and knows how to use it. So, we're lucky we've got 2 drone operators now, so we're doing very well. If you want fancy photos, they can be sponsored. We'll raise money any way we like, really. So, just to move on, and on the final segment before we get to the Q&A, is to give you an update on the V4 and where we are with the V4 project. Those people who are familiar with the V4, often described as Gres's Rolls-Royce, 2 built, none survived, issues with a variety of things, mainly some bloke called Thompson, and a bit of a post-war issue that cheap was needed rather than best. Anyway, firstly, let's just reaffirm and remind ourselves about the specification. The key thing about the V4 is it's much more like the A1 than it is the P2. You've seen some amazing engineering activity talked about today as a prelim to the P2. You'll see it physically this afternoon, those who are going down there. The P2's required significant redesign, as we've heard about, but the A1 didn't. The A1 is really built pretty much off the drawings. The V4 is very much in that category. We will put roller bearings on all axles, as you'd expect us to, and it will be an air-braked engine with vacuum capability. Now, the two big engines have got 2 air pumps each. We have not worked out how to put 2 air pumps on a V4 yet. We can get 1 on, that's fine. 2, probably not. So we might put something in the support coaches just in case. An all-welded boiler, because we know those, and they are easier to manage, they're cheaper to maintain, and therefore that is the correct thing to do. Rob's style of electrical system, as per the other locomotives, and we are probably fortunate. You heard a lot about ETCS. In the list of locos that's in the early fitting of ETCS is Mayflower, a B1. So we'll be stealing an awful lot of intel off of that when they do that one, because the tenders are very, very similar. And as Rob said, the tender is where a lot of the action takes place. And we will increase the water capacity because that is a naturally important aspect of what we will do with any engine, so that it can run well on the main line, minimise water stops, extend range. There will be lots of smaller details as well, but that gives you a feel for where we're going. So the current plan, we've obviously got our new website, and we are looking to enhance the V4 element of that over the coming year. We are readying a Founders Club for launch, and activity is quietly going on in the background. And we will also, once everyone's got past the overhaul of Tornado, because it's all the same people, and as Steve alluded to, there are only so many hours in the day, we will dust off the project plan. We are fortunate in having a project plan that takes you from the start right the way to the point where you affix the nameplates, and it applies to the V4 as much as it did to the A1 and the P2. But before we launch it, the trustees have made a clear decision: is Tornado needs to be back in traffic, and DLW2 needs to be well in hand. There is only so much we can do at once, and to do too much at once would be a risk too far. But looking at the timeline Paul has just outlined to us, if Tornado's back when we expect it to be, and that DLW2 is finished in May as a building, then we can look to spring-summer for next year for the launch of the Founders Club. Remembering that Founders Club runs for, depending on how fast people subscribe, 6 to 12 months before we do much with that activity. And as Chris has said and others have said, it's really how fast can we afford to go on any of our projects. So if somebody wins the Euro Millions and sends a few over, we can go nice and quickly. Otherwise, it will take a little bit of time. So one of the things we get asked an awful lot about the V4 is that either two questions I get. One is, why is it called Anon? Why does that work? At which point you're like, yeah, right, okay. Maybe we didn't do so well with that particular action. And then the next one is, oh, so what's it going to be called then? And we have been working on that. What we've said with the name is it needs to talk to multiple audiences. It can't just be a one-dimensional name. So if you take Tornado, it talks in a number of ways. It's a weather system. It may make you think about Texas. It clearly has got the RAF links, with Leeming and Marham proudly displayed on the nameplates. It reads across. You don't just have to be a railway enthusiast to understand it. Prince of Wales, exactly the same. It's part of the monarchy. It's a rather large aircraft carrier, largest in the fleet. Gentleman at the front will tell me off if I don't mention that. It is slightly bigger than Queen Elizabeth. That counts. But again, it reaches across with more than just, again, a steam locomotive. So it needs to be memorable as well. You don't want to have to try and explain everything a lot. And we've said as well that we've got one affiliation with the RAF, one with the Navy. It would be good to have the set, so it needs to have an Army affiliation. It also has to stand the test of time. there have been some more modern locomotives or multiple units that are on their third or fourth name because they don't stick, and therefore we need it to stand the test of time. So I am the lucky one who gets to stand up here and tell you what the name is going to be, and the trustees have decided that the locomotive will be called Highlander. That reflects a number of things. It reflects the surveys that we've done, and thank you for those who contributed by email, on Facebook and other devices, social media, etc. It recognises that the engines spent an awful lot of their time in the Highlands. It's a good movie with a decent Queen soundtrack, if you like that kind of thing. It does mean, sadly, my personal Piper is working, otherwise I might have got the porridge guns out in here, but I have a feeling that would have deafened all of us, so we'll do that outside. But it does play naturally to a certain history, and it does allow us an affiliation with the Highland Regiments of Scotland. Now, I'm pleased to say that I've been working on this with Steve, as you might expect, and this very morning we have received the email that sort of concluded a degree of work, and there is a lot of excitement and support within the Army in Scotland to make this happen. So we have a name, we have a plan, we just need to get a bit of bandwidth now before we are able to press the button and start taking your support and your donations. What I would like to do, though, is just because we are having to prepare and we want to be fully prepared when the time is right. There's a little bit of a mock-up that we've played around with. I think the nameplate needs a little bit of work, but that wasn't bad, Paul, thank you very much, at very short notice. But everybody will remember that whenever we do a launch or a club, there's always some benefits that come with being part of the family. So I've had commissioned from our good friend Chris Ludlow a painting of 3403, ready to be scanned, or whatever it is these people do, photograph it, so that there will be prints of that painting available to all founders. Now, Chris's work is known to all of us. The magnificent painting of Prince of Wales and Tornado is Chris's handiwork, and if anybody wants to come up to me with a serious offer, proper money, not 10 or 20 pounds, add several noughts to that, that could be yours. It is available. We're not rushing to sell it, but if somebody wants to get their checkbook out or their credit card, we could have a discussion, find me later. But what I'd like to do now, because strangely enough, there's another easel there with a tablecloth over it, so that obviously means we have a painting. So I'd like to invite Chairman Steve and Chris as the artist to, there we go, gentlemen, and to unveil the painting, and it will be, it's a look, don't touch, obviously, but please do come and see it, and it will be here at the dinner as well, so you can all take a look. Thank you very much. And just while Steve's sorting that out, so we're now ready to take any questions and hopefully give you some good answers. Ben and I think Janet will have microphones. We are recording this for those who aren't here, so if you do have a question, please wait for the microphone to come to you so that it gets onto the video, and those who couldn't be with us then can share in the discussions. And I'll hand over to Steve, who's going to compare the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you. We've tied ourselves in knots on this name, so you have no idea how emotionally charged that moment was when the reaction was what it was. You know, you just don't know. Hey, I'm looking forward to this next one, but let's get the current two out of the way. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to marshal the Q&A. The very easy questions I'll answer. The really awkward ones, I'll be going to the toilet and leaving it to my colleagues to tackle. We've got some microphones. Let's do this in a structured way. So if you've got a question, you put your hand up, the microphone will come to you. And if I ask one of my colleagues to speak, they'll have to come up an answer from here. So there'll be a slight time lag while we prepare, but we do want to take your questions very seriously and want to give you as full an answer as we possibly can. In the immortal words of the Army, I don't know the answer to that one, sir, but I'll find out. If we can't answer the question, we will research and come back to you later. So, question number 1, please. Gentleman in the cap in the aisle, please. Thank you. Just pass my glasses.
Thank you. 2 questions, if I may. The new works, are we having PV panels on the roof?
Are we having, sorry?
No, it's not PV panels. Designed by the council. It is, it escapes me now, the form of heating is... No, it's not heat source. But no, it's not gone for massive levels of panels on the roof.
Oh, that's a shame. The second question is, having, shall we say, lost the original Prince of Wales, what steps are being taken to involve the new Prince of Wales, and more especially his children, in what would be a really good opportunity with pictures of those the children on the footplate of the P2?
Well, clearly we are in the hands of the royal household, and as we speak, a variety of organisations who are supported by royals, who are affected by effectively the move up, they're considering that. And I'm a trustee of a national organisation at Army level, which is also waiting for that. So I take your point. There is no name change. So we continue with Prince of Wales, unless the ship decides to change its name, which I don't think it's planning to. I agree, though, that if we could engage Prince William and Kate, that would be brilliant, because it would bring a degree of youth and excitement to our organisation. But we can't force the pace. We will be steered in due course. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Next one, please. Ben, that chap there.
Thank you very much. It's been a very interesting morning so far. Thinking of the Highlander, it's obviously a slightly smaller locomotive, or at least it looks from the illustrations that we're talking about a slightly smaller locomotive. That would normally imply a reduced range, and I don't know what the figures that you're working with are. What role do you envisage for this? We've got 2 mainline steam locomotives that have a pretty good range. Is this going to have a matching range, or be for shorter range operation, or will it be likely to be used on preserved rail more than the...
Right, well, I'll invite Graham to answer that, but there are 2 words that you should work on. One is uniqueness.
Yes.
You know, we are like Jurassic Park. We revive long lost dinosaurs. And secondly is route availability.
Yes.
And of course our 2 engines, current engines, have limited route availability.
Yes, yes. And just if I may, a slightly facetious end note, which is, has Nicola Sturgeon approved this?
I am not going there. Who had Boris Johnson and Nicola Sturgeon in the sweepstake this morning then? Because I'm quite surprised at that. Politicians will not be involved in this because they are transient beings. The answer to your question in reverse order, where will it go is where the money is, which applies to any engine that's got to earn its keep. But yes, it is more suited to preserve lines. Unless you want us to put an 8-wheel tender on it, maybe with a corridor, which would look really silly, then it's going to go for... We have put an extra 9 inches on, so we've gone for the longer group standard LNER tender. And we will do, as David has done on the 8-wheel tender, we will fill out every space we can find and put water in it. But you won't get the 115, 120 mile range you get out of Tornado. And depending on how efficient the P2 is, that will probably struggle to get quite up there. But you will likely to be in the sort of 85 mile range. And when you look at things, there aren't that many itineraries other than north out of King's Cross on the East Coast, where you really, really need it. It's helpful, it's efficient, but that isn't actually what a V4's there to do. So it means it will run very well on the West Highland, obviously. It could do the Aberdonians. And if anyone's seen the LNER Green Books, which I'm not being plugged to say this, but the RCTS for one of their anniversaries, I think for the LNER centenary, are republishing, certainly online. The test trains in East Anglia and on the Great Northern section between Doncaster and Leeds had the engines running with 450 tonnes on not flat railway. Anyone who thinks Anglia is flat needs to visit. So it would be able to stand in for one of the big engines if it needed to, but as Steve has said, it allows us to go places, especially if it's got ETCS on it. It can go down the Cambrian, it can go to Fort William and Mallaig, do all those kind of things. So it's a balance. Cheers.
Thank you. I'd just like to add that I'm personally delighted that we play our part in reinforcing the united nature of our United Kingdom. The Aberdonian series is a case in point. The wonderful cylinder block you're about to see has been built in Scotland. And of course, the allusion to the Scottish regimental connection with Highlander is another important point. And I think that we're playing our part in that. You don't have to worry about politics. Regardless of what happens politically, we will continue to work across that border. And I think that it's important that we make these gestures. It's a happy coincidence, but next question, please. Lady there in the back corner.
Hi, I have two questions. One that is normal and one that I think might be a bit rude to ask. I don't know, I've never been to one of these before. Will Tornado come back to the northwest?
I'm sorry, I'm deaf as opposed to the moment. Can we just get the volume up a little bit more? Yeah. It's all right, it's at this end. We can do that. Right. Sorry, just answer your question again, please.
Will Tornado be coming back to the northwest in the future? Because I went on the Yorvik Express.
To the northwest?
Yes.
Are we going to the northwest? Yes. Where would you like to see it?
Back to Liverpool if you can.
Liverpool. In due course. Yeah.
Richard's not fainted, we'll do Liverpool.
Did you see it when we did the Ticket to Ride?
I didn't see it then, but
Yeah.
I wanted to. I didn't get the chance to.
Yeah. It was great to go there. It really was good. And what was your second question, please?
This is the one that I don't know if it's rude to ask or not. Is the restaying that's going on with the boiler for Tornado right now, is that sort of like caused by the same thing as like the big restaying in like 2010, 2011, where the bunch of them were replaced at once?
Hugh's not as deaf as me, so he's going to answer the question.
So no, in terms of the stay replacement work that we've been doing, 2 years ago we did a number of stays where we replaced standard stays with flexible stays to improve the reliability of stays in the boiler. The new boilers were being built with that new stay pattern that David Elliott had decided and had worked out that would remove some of the challenges we've had. So had a new boiler arrived in the original timeline, then those stays would have been replaced then. Clearly, it's a renovation of the existing boiler, but we want to get a full life out of that boiler when it comes. So it is sensible to replace stays now, whilst the boiler is in the right place in Germany, where they've got all the equipment and to do. So the additional stays, or the stays that I showed on the slide, were for no other reason other than now is the right time to do it. And when we get that boiler back, it will be as close to new as it can be. So there's no other agenda behind that other than it is sensible to do it now. And I'm from Liverpool, so I'd love to bring the engine back to Liverpool.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you.
Gentleman here. Lorraine, can you come across? Thank you.
Probably two questions. First one.
Really close.
What's the purpose of the £700,000 loan that we've taken out, and what's the cost of servicing that, and when do you have to be paid back?
The loan is what's called a Sybil's loan, which was one of those offered at exceptional rates during COVID, which was offered to many, many organisations. It was about 2 years ago now. We've already paid 200,000 off of that, and we're just working our way through it. But have we got a set time? We've got a set repayment pattern, haven't we? 5 year total, of which we've already paid 200,000 off.
Okay, but we're still short of money, even with the £700,000 loan.
Correct, yes. Yeah. There's no point in me, I'm not going to beat about the bush.
Second question.
We're not short of money. No, we want an increased rate of income in order to do what we need to do at the appropriate pace.
Okay, whichever way you want to phrase it. Second question was with the boilers. We seem to have ended up with sort of almost the worst of both worlds now. Because Tornado's overhaul is so delayed, would it not have been possible, therefore, to have still gone with the first new boiler and avoid the cost of replacing it?
Yeah, it's a fair question, but there's a lot of factors at play. Which, anyway.
You always ask good questions, Ian. I like that. There's no silver bullet type answer to that. Which way you go depends on when you think you're going to be ready, and the fitment of the ETCS and the way that's gone has required a different channel as well, because no one's ever done it before, and the folks are learning a lot on the way. I think Hugh mentioned it earlier, folks. I don't think we in the UK really appreciate how much Germany has suffered because of COVID. It's suffered way more than we have, and manufacturing has suffered the most. And Germany has a massive manufacturing industry. So have we got it right? Time will tell. We haven't, as Chris has said, we haven't really done anything wrong. We've just tried to balance things through in the right way. So a little bit of short-term pain while we work through it, but it will actually unravel and come right in the end. I don't think, with what we know so far, they would have been any faster finishing the new boilers because of the skill sets required. And one of the major weaknesses in Germany at the moment is welders. It's difficult in this country too. And the welding elements of the new boiler were one of the challenges. And there's less welding to be done on the refurbishment. So, you know, that's the nature of it. But we're in a good place, even though it's hurting us to get there. Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Anyone further over here? Hand up there.
Whilst I am not concerned about burning a few tons of coal in a steam locomotive, there are some people that think that coal is the devil itself. I think we'll need a fairly silver tongue to persuade some people that it's okay to burn some coal. So it's not a question, it's just I'm wondering what your answer would be when somebody asks you that question in the future.
Right, okay, look, to use the phrase just used, there is no silver bullet to this either at the moment. We as a body are conscious of the direction of travel with this debate. We're also clear that there are a variety of experiments going on at the moment to produce so-called eco-coal, and there have been a number of trials with it, and there's various approaches to this. Some have been successful, some haven't. But the challenge is going to be upscaling that fuel from comparatively small engines to engines of our size, which have to sustain very high levels of horsepower on the main line. And so clearly we don't want to be out of step. We need to promote our environmental credentials. And to that end, we already have an offset program for trees, which Graham Langer has been managing on our behalf. So we're not blind to this. On the other hand, we have to allow the boffins, the scientists, and those who are developing this to evolve an appropriate solution for us. What we don't want to come across, though, is we're not Luddites, and we want to actively contribute to that debate. The separate question, though, of course, is that of coal supply in its current form. And despite the fact that there is the Russians have become persona non grata in terms of coal supply, adequate coal supplies are still coming through into the UK, interestingly from Kazakhstan at the moment. For us to be able to produce our own coal in sufficient quantities, especially when we are still importing 30 million tonnes a year of it, but not necessarily for steam engines. So your point is very valid. It is a debate that is not going away, and we want to actively engage in that debate, not for politically correct reasons, but because it's the right thing to do. But trying to rush our fences is not the way. You've got to optimise the fuel to the combustion chamber, and so on and so on and so forth. The Heritage Railway Association and others are leading the charge on that and are clearly advising the wider industry on developments. But equally, there's a commercial imperative for some of the coal suppliers to get this right, but to make sure also that this is not what I call false environmentalism, because creating eco-coal involves applying energy to make that coal in the first place. So it's not just about, we've got to be careful that it isn't about what goes up the chimney, it's about the whole life environmental footprint from construction of that coal through to its burning. And I think that's the bigger debate that the sector has to have. Does that answer your question? But thank you for raising that, I appreciate that. Anyone want to add anything to it? Right. No, thank you.
No need to sound so surprised.
I've been listening. Any more questions, or are you getting hungry? Is that... Richard? Stand up, Richard. Announce yourself first before the question.
Richard Corsa. I have a couple of questions. One,
From?
DB Cargo. I'm also a supporter of this. I've also put in some founding capital into the P2 a few years ago anyway, but it's my first time here at the conference. I've got one question first about the boiler. When you took it to Meiningen, did you actually find that your water treatment and everything had worked pretty well? And I was interested to know that.
Good question.
Because obviously the you know, to see that's really important over the how that's gone.
So I think we've been learning about our boiler management ever since Tornado first started running. We've improved continuously our water treatment in terms of we're now using liquid water treatment rather than dissolving tannin powder and adding that into the tender. So when we opened the boiler up, in fact, we knew before the boiler went because we had washed it out before it left. And we've been pleased throughout the last few years of managing the engine about how our water management and boiler management has been paying dividends. So directly on water treatment, yes, it was in a very good condition when they opened it up in Meiningen.
That's really good to know. Secondly, just to add to what Steve said about coal, DB Cargo still moving a lot of coal in South Wales, still from Cwmbargoed down to Tata Steel. As you probably know, you can't make steel without burning coal. So as long as that steelworks has a blast furnace and it requires coal, it would seem sensible to source that coal locally in South Wales rather than getting it from thousands of miles all over the world. So I'm still quietly confident that the Welsh Government are hearing this loud and clear from the HRA and others. And yes, I do have an interest in another loco that particularly wants that coal. So you know, and Tornado, I'm sure, will burn that coal. And it's also a coal that is very clean burning. This is the point. South Wales coal is probably one of the most clean burning coals that there are. So I'm just hopeful that that still will be available for the A1 as well. And there is new seams. You know, the whole of South Wales has still got millions of tons of coal. It's there. We should try and still mine it, in my view.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a trick with a convention. That's always to make sure you've got someone who has been primed with the last question. That was a perfect question to finish on, but he's not primed, so many thanks indeed. Right, I think we'll draw stumps on questions. Clearly, throughout the rest of the afternoon, if you've got questions, you know, the team's around. Just come and grab us by the throat and force the answers out of us. As I say, if we don't know the answer, we won't fob you off. We will go and research. In summary, there's a huge amount going on. And as I say, we are reacting to that backstop of 2025. The concertina was stretched and we had lots of time, but world events and pandemics and so on have forced us and forced us and forced us there. We have the capacity and the capability to deliver this lot, and I hope you've actually been excited by the sheer quality of what you've seen on the screens, particularly DLW2, which is a real game changer because it turns us from being a location in Darlington that builds engines to one that builds, maintains, services, and also provides facilities for mainline operators. So all of a sudden, Darlington itself becomes a much more viable destination for mainline steam tours. As has been said many times, we cannot do this without you. And we never forget that. We try to over-communicate with you, and I do hope you appreciate the periodic letters you get from me personally, just to keep you apprised of what is going on. Many thanks, ladies and gentlemen.
The last 12 months have seen relatively little progress on the main locomotive, in part due to COVID problems, but particularly more recently due to diversion of resources onto putting Tornado back together during its overhaul. However, we have made some progress with the locomotive, including significant further installation of the trunking system to carry the electrics. And this is an example here of a switch box for one of the turbogens with its stainless steel pipework and stainless steel boxes everywhere. I suppose the major thing that happened in the last 12 months was the fitment of the coupling rods and the demonstration that the whole lot went round using our motorisation equipment. Unfortunately, the latter found that the additional pair of coupled wheels associated with the P2 was a bit too much for it. It was originally schemed to suit Tornado with its 6 coupled wheels, and it's currently in need of repair. However, we were able to demonstrate, and we have some nice footage of the wheels going around with the rods fitted, clearly indicating that we seem to have got the dimensions for the length of the rods and the distance between the axles correct, because it ran round smoothly without any embarrassing clicks and bangs. Other work that has progressed is that we now have most of the brake gear fitted to the engine. You can see here one of the complex brake hangers with its brake block on it, and the brake stay, which is the flat bar that joins it to the one on the other side. We still have the final fitting of the rods to do, but these need individually cutting to fit, to make sure that they are correct to fit the brake rigging as it is at the moment. Further copper pipe work has been created, as you can see on this pallet behind, which is all ready to go onto the engine and has already been on, but obviously to enable other work to go on between the frames has been taken off for the time being. The other area where work is progressing is the pony truck, which again is conspicuous by its absence. It's currently round at Triple T Engineering in Shildon, but before we can finish it, we need the cannon box repairing. If you have kept up to date with the communication cord, you will be aware that we've had a problem with the manganese steel liners on the cannon box. The cannon boxes are currently at Locomotive Maintenance Services at Loughborough, which, once their welder is allowed a bit of a break from the substantial reconstruction of Tornado's tender for the European train control system, he will be welding on the liners to the cannon boxes. This is a somewhat specialist process because we are welding 2 dissimilar metals together, being 11 to 14% manganese steel to ordinary mild steel. And there is a special welding code for that, which Adam at Loughborough possesses. Once that has happened, we will be able to get the machining completed on the pony truck itself, and the pony truck can then be fully assembled. In the meantime, there have been some components delivered which are part of this, in particular the spherical side bearers here, which which go between the pony truck and the frame. And as you can see, the spherical shape enables a small amount of movement to take up flexing of the frames and movement of the pony truck. The main pony truck side-to-side movement is taken on a synthetic pad that sits in here and presses up underneath the bogie top centre, which is this plate here. That enables the whole pony truck to slide from side to side with a little bit of friction to control its movement at high speeds. Today, Tuesday the 18th of October, represents an important day in the progress of the project. We have temporarily had the cylinder block delivered here in time for the convention. Following a big design effort, including production of dozens of detailed drawings, we retained Halco at Irvine in Scotland to manufacture this cylinder block for us last year. At this stage, the cylinder block is not far off completion, but unfortunately it wasn't quite ready for the convention. So in order to give you the chance to see what is by far and away the largest and most significant piece of the work for the frames being done to date, we brought it down from Halco for the convention. At this stage, around about 90% of the main machining task has been completed. Prior to that, Halco fabricated, i.e. welded together all the individual components and then stress relieved the block prior to machining taking place. There are still some things to finish off, which I will describe in more detail as we go round, and we still need to get the cast iron liners fitted to the cylinders and the valve seats fitted to each of the individual valve chambers. They will then be finished machined, along with details such as the covers and the temporary obstruction plates to enable a hydraulic test to be undertaken before the block is finally delivered to us. We are presently looking at the rear of the cylinder block. As you will be well aware, the P2 is a 3-cylinder engine, and what we're looking at here are the stuffing boxes where the piston rods come through, and in this hole here are the packings which prevent steam leaking out of the piston rod when it's moving backwards and forwards. Above that, this is a slide bar support, and then above that we have the bits that distinguish this locomotive from most steam locomotives around today. These are the housings for the poppet valves. This, the smaller one, is the inlet valve, and the larger one here is the exhaust valve. The steam for the inlet comes in through a cast steel steam port here, which is something that William Cook Cast Product Sheffield made for us, and has subsequently been machined up and welded onto the next of the structure. The exhaust comes out of the ports here, which go down to the cylinders, through the valve, and then goes backwards into another series of ports which are between the frames inside the cylinder assembly to come out at the blast pipe. Now, as we move across to the middle, we have a repeat performance with another stuffing box here, piston rod, slide bar mounting. The difference this time is that we have moved the valves from being above the cylinder, because if they had been, they'd have ended up in the smoke box, down to one side here. But the relationship between inlet, exhaust and cylinder is geometrically the same as it is on the outside cylinder, except that it's tipped over. Again, we have a cast steel steam port feeding from each end, at each end. These cast steel steam ports represent a major departure from the original design, which was flawed by having the ports feeding these cylinders built in to the centre casting, and where in some cases they were separated from exhaust only by a single thickness of cast iron. This had the downside of when the engine was working hard, the incoming steam was superheating the outgoing exhaust up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit when they measured this on the Vitry plant. This is, of course, is very undesirable because that's wasted energy. It also had the other drawback that the extra energy in the exhaust made the blast so fierce that it tended to lift the fire off the grate. What we've done in the redesign is to keep the inlet steam separate from the frames and the exhaust as much as possible so that we don't get this heat transfer going on. The final thing I will point to here is this. This comes out of the exhaust ports inside and is the feed for exhaust steam to the exhaust steam injector at the back of the engine. One more thing we'll look at before we move round to the front of the cylinder block is the method by which this block is located in the frames on the engine. Essentially, there are 3 pads on each side which are part of the side frames of the block, which locate very accurately in corresponding cutouts on the frames. There is one at the back here, there is one underneath, and there is a similar one to the back at the front. And the intention is that when we finally lower the cylinder block onto the frame, there will be a small interference in these front and back ones with the corresponding slot in the frames, as that will lock the cylinder block very firmly into place, in the right place. You will see here that some machining has been going on. This is Halco's preliminary machining of this face, which ultimately has to be set so that from there across to here, its opposite number, is precisely the right distance for the distance on the outsides of the frames. As you can see, we already have the cutouts in the frames, which were accurately CNC machined when the frame plates were machined and drilled right back in the early days. Moving round to the front of the block, we'll explain some of the salient features here. Essentially, the front of the block is a mirror image of the back of the block, except of course that instead of stuffing boxes, we have cylinder covers bolted on to the front of the 3 cylinders here. The valves, though, are effectively identical. This is a full-sized 3D printed model of an inlet valve. It's what is known as a double beat valve. So there are actually 2 seats, one there and one here, which make contact with the seats inside the valve chamber to seal it when it's closed. Now, this in principle is like a car valve, but they are only single seat or beat valves. The reason why we need 2 in this design is that the volumes of steam are much larger than the corresponding volumes of exhaust or inlet gas that you would find on a car type engine. So in order to give greater capacity, as soon as this valve opens, steam can pass round here into the cylinder and through the middle. This makes the effective area of the valve when it is open much bigger than a normal car valve would be. And this locates inside the steam valve port and steam chest here. I'm just offering up to roughly where it is at the moment. There will ultimately be cast iron seats pressed into these places to form the seal with the valve. Now the valve itself will have a spring on the outside here between it and the cover to keep it shut, and there will be a spindle in the hole here which extends through a seal and another valve seat into the middle area of the cylinder block. One thing we have to do with this cylinder block, because it is made of steel, is to insert cast iron liners into the cylinder to provide adequate smooth lubrication for the pistons. This cast iron is a special mix that used to be known as cylinder metal and includes a certain amount of phosphorus in it, which provides considerable toughness to wear, which is obviously essential in something which has got a piston rubbing up and down in it all the time. The liner has ports machined into it to correspond to the ports which take the steam up to the from and to the valves. We are now looking at the smokebox saddle. This area here forms the floor of part of the smokebox. And in order to enable us to bolt the smokebox on reasonably accurately, you will see some machining has gone on here to come up with the correct profile for the bottom of the smokebox. There will ultimately be machined sections along here as well for the same reason. We have 3 conspicuous holes in the top of the smokebox. The first one here is the incoming main steam pipe from the superheater header to serve the steam feeds to the middle cylinder. So this basically goes down into a pipe which is connected to the cast steel steam ports at either end. And this will eventually have a spherical lens joint on it and 4 studs to connect the pipe to. The hole in the middle here is for the blast pipe, and the blast pipe itself bolts onto the top of here once Halco have finished machining and adding stud holes. And finally we have a hole over here which will simply have a lid on it, which is bolted down, and the purpose of this hole is to facilitate in installing the drive to the valves for the inside steam valves, inside cylinder steam valves. The valve and valve spindle are mounted on what is effectively a combined inner seat and valve guide, such that the spindle sticks a little way out of this housing here when fully installed. We then have a cam box which sits in here, which has a total of 6 tappets sticking out of it, each of which comes into contact with one of these spindles. And the cam, as it goes round, pushes the tappet in and out to open the valve when you require it. Now, to add to the complexity, we have a problem on this that having moved the valves for the middle cylinder over to this side of the block, the drive for the inlet valve for the middle cylinder is still on the other side of the engine. So to overcome this, we have designed a set of rocker shafts and rockers which will come down to here, where you will see where the valves come out for the inside cylinder inlet valve. And the rockers will pass across the top of the cylinder there, through the gap you can see, so that the rocker on the other side corresponds to the inlet valve cams, which are attached to the cam box on the other side. The cam boxes themselves will be mounted on runners, which will be welded into here once all the rest of the work has been done, and they're designed so that there's just a couple of bolts hold each cam box in, and for maintenance purposes you undo the bolts with their catches and then just slide the whole cam box out and work on it on a bench, because obviously there is not a lot of room inside here to be able to take the cam box apart. I hope that this look round the engine has been informative, and trust that my colleagues who are here today will be able to fill you in on other questions that you may have regarding what's been going on here. Please enjoy the rest of the convention.